looks like most of the people who signed up are here. Might be a couple more coming in a minute. Again, welcome to Understanding Modular Assessments for Grade 5, Math, ELA, and Science. I am Ann Mordecai, and I'm here with Heather Jenkins and Annie Wallace. And I should turn my phone off. Is this the second slide? Yes, I missed one. This is the who we are is who is demonstrated success. Heather and I are from Demonstrated Success. Annie's from the DOE. I think you know who the DOE is. Demonstrated Success is, we're made up of a bunch of people who have been working in education for combined, a million years. And we present and we put together documents and we write white papers. And for the remote learning support, we've done tons of webinars and with over 30,000 people watching them. Is that really right? That's amazing. Okay, next page. Thank you to the DOE. The DOE is sponsoring this webinar and quite a few others that we're doing. And thank you all for sticking with working with your kids and somehow surviving being the director and the script writer and everything for this year. Everyone will be muted during the webinar just so that we can't hear barking dogs, etc. But at the end, if you have questions and you want to ask them, you can raise your hand and we'll open it up for speaking. If you have questions, if you could put them into the Q&A section instead of the chat section. I'll be monitoring the Q&A section, and sometimes I forget to look at the chat section. But if you have something you want to tell everybody, you can put it in the chat section. And tomorrow you'll get an email that will give you a link to the video of this webinar, also a link to the PD certificate, the PowerPoint, and any other documents that Heather is going to show you today. And this is us. When you get the PowerPoint, you can read about us instead of me telling you.
Yep, sounds good. Okay, so this is where I take over. Just hello, I'm Heather Jenkins. I'm going to put my camera, turn that off. It does end up distracting me just a little bit. So, sorry, wanted to make sure. Here we go. Okay, so just a gentle reminder. So the real goal of our classroom assessment is to improve student performance and not merely audit it. Today, we're going to be doing just that, looking at the New Hampshire SAS modular assessments to help improve student performance. So as we look at our day today, here are our goals. Basically, we're going to go over why we use the New Hampshire SAS modular assessments, what options there are for 5th grade, how the modular assessments help you better understand your grade level standards, and how do you get to them? And then what's next after that? So the first thing I want to go over is a little bit of the benefits and uses of the modular assessments. Just some general information about this. First off, they're short periodic assessments. There's 8 to 12 questions. For ELA, there are quite a few more questions than that, but they're not like the New Hampshire SAS interims or summative assessments. They're really a more brief assessment than that. All students get the same questions. So unlike when you went and looked at your interim data possibly at the beginning of this year and everybody got different questions, these are all the exact same questions for each student. So it makes it a little bit easier for you to assess how they're doing with specific standards. The questions are based on the Common Core, and they are based on the domains within the Common Core, and you can match them up with specific units. So for example, if you're doing a unit on fractions, you can look at the numbers and operations fractions domain, and you're able to choose modular assessments from that. You can administer these anytime throughout the year. There is no limitation. They may not, obviously, you're not going to probably do them at the end of the year with the summatives. You want to space them out, but again, any other time is fine. And they're administered at your current grade level or whatever the appropriate grade level is for your student or students. So how they help teachers, they can help you measure student achievement. They're automatically scored and the results are almost immediate and down to the question level. So as soon as the students are finished taking the assessment, the scores are ready. They can help you evaluate your program impact. So if you have a new program or if you've been using a specific program, you can see how well that program is in covering the standards that are needed. They can help you understand each child's progress, gaps, and needs. So you can look down right to the student level and figure out possibly where some gaps may be or some extra teaching may need to be. They can help you determine resource needs. So if you do need some kids need additional help and you have additional resources like Title I or any other math or ELA support, you might be able to use these to help assess those resources. And they can provide detailed information for instructional purposes for you. They can be, again, done at the beginning, middle, or end of a unit. So depending on how you're using them, you can figure out what you might need to reteach or what some traditional gaps might be. And this is a big one. They can help teachers gain an understanding of the standards and the depth of knowledge needed for students to be successful. So a lot of what we're going to show you today are some examples of the modular assessments and the questions and where there might be some common misunderstandings for students or possibly some things that we might be missing in our teaching. For student benefits, that gives the students an idea of what the assessments are all about. So as they are using the modular assessments, they are also in turn seeing what the types of questions might be on the summative assessments, and it just allows them to get more familiar with that. So again, it allows them to practice in that New Hampshire SAS system in the portal. And it takes away some of the barriers of testing. When you go through and you look at some of these modular questions, you might see that there are some questions that might be worded differently than what you might be doing in the classroom, or some of the tools that might be used may not be what they're traditionally used to. We wanted to put an example here. So for a school example, there was a teacher that we followed. She started using the modular assessments with her students in the 2014-15 school year. And her students were about 50% proficient on the New Hampshire SAS summative assessments. And as she started working throughout the years with the modular assessments, her students started performing in turn better on the New Hampshire SAS summative assessments. And so they just continued to do better and better on that summative assessment. So how they can be used as an end of unit assessment. They can be used as a pre-assessment for a unit. So you can take a peek at what some students might know already or might be missing and make sure that you focus on those. They can be set up as an assignment in the portal as a formative assessment. So if you're working through your unit and you want to see how kids are doing, you can set it up as an assignment. You can also do it as an assignment as an end of unit assessment as well. And we can talk a little bit about that. So they can be used as a practice test for the New Hampshire SAS summative assessments. And you can also use them through the assessment viewing application. You can show just individual questions so that you can do a question of the day or example questions for your students. So, modular assessment options for grade 5. So here are all the different options that we have for the modulars. You can see for reading, there's editing, informational text, listening, and reading literature. For writing, there's informative and opinion. You've got some math, which is measurement, data, and geometry. So keep in mind with math, they have combined some of the domains so that 2 of them are in one. So measurement, data, and geometry is in the same sort of category. For the modulars, numbers and operations base 10, numbers and operations fractions, and then operations and algebraic thinking. And in addition, for 5th grade, there you also have the science modulars that you are able to take a look at and show your students as well. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Starting with math, here are all the options for modular assessment topics for math. So you can see for measurement, data, and geometry, there's an A, a B, and a C. And then you can also see for numbers and operations base 10, there's an A, a B, a C, and a D. And then for numbers and operations fractions, there's an A, B, C. And then for operations and algebraic thinking, there's an A and a B. So what we're just showing you here is that there's multiple options to be able to assess the same domain or set of skills. It's not exactly apples to apples when it comes to the assessments, and that's what this page is here. We broke down each modular by figuring out how many multiple choice questions there were and how many open questions there were, so that you could maybe make a determination if you were looking at the modular assessments and maybe you didn't want to do a fully multiple choice modular as an assessment. You would maybe not want to use modular B for operations and algebraic thinking. You might want to choose modular A. So we have created these spreadsheets so that you can just kind of get an understanding of the types of questions that are being asked for each modular. In addition, we've also broken down according to the Common Core and the Achieve the Core, the major standards supporting and additional standards, and what each modular has for those. So if we're looking at operations and algebraic thinking, this is an additional cluster for 5th grade. And you'll see that this means that there's 4 questions on OA1, 6 questions on OA2, and 2 questions on OA3 on this modular A. So we thought it might be helpful if you know that you're teaching a specific standard, you would be able to look at a modular, if you're looking at numbers and operations with fractions A, and you would see if you're teaching a specific standard, maybe you're teaching NF2, NF3, then you might look at this particular, the modular C, because it's got a couple of questions on that particular standard. Again, if you're getting down to the standard level, we just thought it would be helpful for you to see this. In addition, we have Annie Wallace here that works with the DOE. She has been spending an exorbitant amount of time making these fabulous spreadsheets for us that they go through each modular and they go through, so this is numbers and operations fractions A, and she goes through all of the questions. She also has the standard listed here, but this is even better too, because she's got a focus area. So if you are teaching a specific focus area, you could look at the focus area. She has the common misunderstandings and areas of challenge for students. And then here's the example of just what they're using, the types of tools, and any other notes. This is going to be one of the spreadsheets and one of the documents that you are going to have full access to. This is just a screenshot, and it's the tip of the iceberg for what Annie has done for this. She's broken it down for every single modular so that it can help you if you are using these for questions of the day, or you just want to know a little bit about what each modular is for math. Then she has it all broken down. So you will have access to that folder in this particular document. So for ELA, for the modular assessment topics for English language arts, so here we are, we have an editing modulars, we have reading informational text, we have a listening modular, and then a literature A, and then informative, so literature A and B, informative, and then opinion writing. So these are the writing ones down here, the informative and opinion. Again, we've broken it down by the types of questions that they have. You can see that the ELA modulars have more questions, and we can kind of get into that. There's typically a couple of passages when you're doing the reading, and then it's giving you general information and some multiple choice and some open questions for each one of those. For the breakdown, it is a little bit different for ELA. when we look at standards, we know that when we teach ELA, even though one standard is listed on the modular questions, we know that for when we're teaching reading, that it tends to be a lot of different standards that are kind of coming together. It's not quite as laser focused as math, but they do have them listed on the modulars. So we have put them here for you. These documents here and these sort of guides for you are also helpful because at this point right now, when we look in the assessment viewing application and you are looking at the modulars and just taking a peek, it does not tell you exactly what the standard is that it's covering. It does show up in the reporting. So after students take the assessment, it will tell you the standard, but we wanted to make it a little bit easier for you to understand the standards before the kids are taking them. So science modulars, there are a lot of different assessment topics for the science modulars. These topics span the next generation science standards for grades 3 through 5, but they are only available under 5th grade. So if you look here, and if we were to look at this particular modular, you can see here that it says 5 ESS 2-2, that's a 5th grade one. So these are all, that doesn't look like 5th grade, but the 5 is on the line above. These are all the 5th grade specific topics. Now it spans grades 3 through 5 because we know with the next generation science standards that you have the options depending on your school for when you teach specific science units. So it might vary a little bit. We have made grades 3 and 4 aware that they do have some topics in here that are listed under grade 5, but they are all in your particular assessment viewing application grade level. They're in the 5th grade. So here they are. Those are the specific to 5th grade, but that doesn't mean these are the only ones you're looking at. These do directly correlate with the next generation science standards. Just a heads up for science folks, students do not typically score well on the New Hampshire SAS science assessments in general. They're, they tend to be something that are not as familiar to students. So don't forget about them because they're not only a great way to take a look at science topics, but they're really good for practicing reading informational text and comprehending, and a lot of those crucial problem solving skills that students need.
Heather, we have a question.
Okay.
Can anybody in any grade take the 5th grade science?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, they can take them even in 8th grade if they wanted to take them in 8th grade.
Okay, great. So 3rd grade can take 5th grade, 6th grade can take 5th grade. Great.
Yep. Yep. Anything else before I move on?
Nope, not right now.
Great. All right, so this is where we get into specific standards. This is, we went through each one of the domains and we decided to come up with a specific question for each one of the domains for math and what a common misconception will be. I am going to go through these relatively quickly, but know you'll have the PowerPoint. And in addition to this, we have a whole grade 5 document that has all of these screenshots and everything on it. Just a heads up, these are not exact questions from the assessment viewing application or the modulars. We have changed some of the numbers, but they're very similar questions. So just know you won't look in the assessment viewing application and see these exact questions. But here we are. So now we're looking at operations and algebraic thinking. So we're looking at the standard 5OA1. And as we're looking at these, one of the things that we noticed is that students really need to practice the order of operations, including the use of parentheses or grouping symbols. Annie Wallace let me know that that's sort of the new terminology that they're using instead of parentheses is the terminology called grouping symbols. So just a heads up on that. And so we found specifically that for question, this number 4 here, almost every student that we saw, this was one of the lowest types of lower scoring questions there were for operations and algebraic thinking. Almost every student that got it wrong answered with the number 15, because they were forgetting that you're multiplying by a 0 here, and so the answer would be 0. So this is just one of those that trips some kids up for operations and algebraic thinking. For numbers and operations base 10, we're looking at 5 NBT7. So you're looking at this model represents the expression, and now we're working with decimals here. What we've noticed is that students are not necessarily teaching using concrete models as a part of this standard. So we need to make sure that we're using the models that look like this, and that the concepts such as multiplication don't always result in a larger number, because we're dealing with decimals here. And the hint would be also to have students use the terminology and say 4/10 instead of 0.4, so that they're really taking a look at that and understanding that in the realm of place value as well. So the next example for numbers and operations fractions is for NF1. This is the question that we show almost every 5th grade teacher, and they say, oh my gosh, I don't teach this. You do teach it, you just may not teach it like this with fractions and mixed numbers. So we just wanted to make sure that you knew that that was something that is in the standards, and just making sure that you're looking at mixed numbers. We all teach 5 minus n equals 2 or whatever we do. We just need to make sure that we're teaching it with those mixed number fractions as well. We also like this one because it shows the little pad here that you use. It's not a calculator, it's a pad. So making sure that they understand how to use those different symbols, and that pad is also important. For measurement and data, it's combined measurement, data, and geometry, but we did want to do one measurement and data question and then one geometry one. So we're looking at 5MD, 5B. You can take a look here, and they're talking about the volume of a rectangular prism. So basically what we're doing is we're teaching students here to label a picture, giving it different dimension. So for total volume, and we often forget that we're going from total volume to the possible dimensions. So we just need to make sure that we're not just doing it one way, so that students are able to use their knowledge to figure it out either way. For geometry, we're looking at 5G4. And this is taking a look at the properties of trapezoids and squares. So we found that kids learn to define and classify shapes, it's starting in kindergarten, but we want to make sure that they understand that you still need to do that up through 5th grade, and just making sure that students understand that there's a lot of different classifications and definitions for shapes. Moving on to the ELA and looking at the reading literature. This is an example where we have a passage here that there may be more than one passage. This looks like it's just a single passage. And then what they need to do is they need to be able to answer lots of different questions that have to do with a specific passage. We do this a lot when we're teaching, but it's not in an environment that looks quite like this, where they might need to highlight, they might need to go over and refer back to the passage on their computer or things like that. So a lot of questions have 2 parts. They really tend to be heavy on vocabulary and understanding the meaning of a specific passage. And there are lots of questions about summary, plot, and plot, along with supporting details. So, and we know you teach that, but it's really good to go in and take a look at how the questions are worded and how some students might need to answer them. In addition, if you look at this part A, it is multiple choice. Part B, you select 2 sentences, so there's a multi-select. So make sure that you're doing those types of questions as well. For informational text, it's the same thing. You get a passage and students need to answer multiple questions about it. This is, again, they need to select 2 sentences out of all of this that basically support the idea or some major theme within this passage. So again, they have quite a bit of vocabulary in the context of the text and how different parts of the text connect and support central ideas. So central theme and supporting details are really prevalent in a lot of these reading informational text modulars. For editing, just having them go in and take a look at how this works will help immensely. They need to understand how to click and edit selections along with rules of grammar. So you can see here, this says tracks, comma, from the east the. So they need to replace something in here and then click OK. So they need to be able to choose, and there's a little up and down arrow here. So just making sure that they know how to navigate this is going to be helpful as well. Obviously, rules of grammar are super important too. For speaking and listening, they are going to listen to something and then answer multiple questions on it. So they need to be able to kind of go back and forth from listening and be able to answer the questions. So for writing, there's informative writing. There is here, you'll have a passage or passages, and then they have to do, it's a little bit different type of writing than what they might be used to in response to text. So make sure that you go in and take a peek at the types of questions. If you look here, they're going to write in an informational essay, and you can look here and see all of the information that needs to go into the essay. In addition, when we're asking them to provide details or support or be able to form their own writing, if they cut and paste from the passage over here too often, then they're going to get marked down. They can't just copy and paste from the passage. They don't get credit for that. So you need to show them how to create and make sure they're wording things in their own way. And make sure that they're understanding what's expected of the writing. There are rubrics within the New Hampshire SAS portal for writing that will help you understand how kids can score better on the writing assessments. It's also an area where we have seen that kids have trouble with. So I'll show you where those are located as well. Same thing with the writing for opinion. They're going to read a passage or passages, and then they are going to write an opinion piece and making sure that they're using information to support their way of thinking. Again, you can't cut and paste, so kids need to know how to be able to create their own thinking from reading a passage. For the science modulars, this is an example here. They seem on the onset, some of them seem like, oh, these shouldn't be too bad, but they are harder than they seem. This doesn't have a lot of information in the passage or the general area. This is all they have to read. And then they have a task. And then this task has basically, they're reading this and they have to answer all of the questions that go along with it. And they have to be able to make sure that they're getting everything correct here to be getting full credit. So it's not quite as easy. Like this is select 3 conditions. Here's choose three problems. Here they have to use a drop-down menu to have it make sense and have the phrases in complete sentences. So those are a little bit more difficult than you would think. Anne and I were laughing and talking the other day about her taking them, and they really are a little bit harder than you would think. So it's really good to go through with your students and have them take a peek at what some expectations for problem solving and the types of questions there may be. And are there any questions before I move on to the assessment viewing application?
Nope, no questions yet.
Okay, great. Okay, so for the assessment viewing application, I did want to go through in this PowerPoint a step-by-step for just how to get there in case you need to know. So the first step, you go to the New Hampshire statewide assessment system. It's the NH portal, cambiumask.com. Used to be New Hampshire portal airask.org, but Cambium has taken over for that now. So make sure you've got the correct, if you just type in a New Hampshire SAS assessments, it actually comes up with the URL that you need. So if you're stuck, you don't have to remember this 100%. So on this first page, you're going to choose test administration. And then here you are going to go into the assessment viewing application. And I just want to reiterate, it is just that. You're viewing the questions. You aren't necessarily doing the questions. Even if you went through and you did it as you went and like clicked on answers, it's not going to give you a score or anything like that. It's a really good way for you to see the questions, take a peek at what there is, or for you to show your students questions, either projecting them on a screen for Zoom or projecting them in a classroom. So that's what the assessment viewing application is. As you log in, this is the same way you were to have logged in when you administered the interim assessments. We have found that some schools have just a couple people who do the whole administering of the assessments. And a lot of teachers don't necessarily have access to set up a modular as an assessment. If you are having trouble, make sure you ask your administrator, or you can always contact us and we can try to help you figure out why you might not have access to the system, but you should be able to put in your email address and password. If you haven't logged in since the interims, it might send a code to your email. If you haven't logged in a while, it does tend to do that to make sure that you have a secure username and password. It will then bring you to a screen that looks like this for available tests, and you'll just select your grade level. And then these are what shows up when you select grade 5. All the science ones sort of show up at the top. There's a couple of science ones on the bottom too, so don't miss them. And then there's ELA and math mixed in there as well. They used to be color coded by science, ELA, and math. And we've asked to have them that way again because it does get a little bit tricky, specifically for grades 5 and 8, where you have a ton of science mixed in as well. But so far, they're kind of all in the same spot. So all you would do is you click right on whatever modular you want, and it opens that right up to question 1. I'm going to go live into the assessment viewing application, just so that I can show you a little bit of that again. So if you are here, I'm looking at this. This is the New Hampshire portal, cambiumask.com. I click on test administration. I go into the assessment viewing application, I log in, and I come to the available tests, and I'm going to select grade 5. So as you scroll down, again, grade 5 has a lot because you have science mixed in there, but here are all your options for the modular assessments. Again, we're just viewing them here, and you can go through question by question and see what types of questions there are for a specific modular. I want to show you too a little bit of what it looks like. These, I'm not sure many people have used when they're getting ready or practicing for assessments. So I do want to show you as well here. If we go in here and you choose, this is a regular page here, and you go into practice and training tests, these are not modulars, just so you know. This is just a single practice test for math for your grade level or ELA or for science. And if I were to click on take the practice and training tests, You just sign in as a guest user. You just click sign in. I wanted to show you this because this is similar to what the modulars look like in the assessment viewing application. So we have this here if I were to choose grade 5. So here's the practice tests. This also will give you a little bit of information about what types of questions and how the questions look. These are kind of like released items. These are much longer, just so you know, than a modular. So if I click on this math grade 5 practice test, it is going to have me go through and check sort of some of the tools that I have. I'm just going to select the default. This will be a familiar sound for you.
This text is being read aloud.
Okay, I heard the voice. Continue. And then I'm just going to say begin test. All right, so this can show you, this looks very similar to what the modulars look like, where you have the first question here, and then you can take a look at it, and then you can scroll through all of the different questions that they have. Now, when you go through the assessment viewing application and you look at the modulars, it's much like this. It does not show you the answer. It does not show you the standard or anything attached to it. Again, it's after you take that modular assessment that it will show you that information. But this can also be helpful for you to take a look at or have your students take a look at as well. And I just wanted to show it to you because it's very similar to what the modulars look like. I'm gonna go back here. Any questions at all, Anne, at this point for that?
Nope, we are still moving forward. Please ask questions though.
Okay. All right, so the next thing that we have here is administering and reporting. So if you are going to administer an assessment, not just look in the assessment viewing application, but actually either assign a modular as an assessment or be able to have kids complete questions, this is what you would be doing here. So different things that you can do. So question of the day, you can present your screen. You can do that right from the assessment viewing application. If you are going to just show them and want to be able to talk about a question and what sort of barriers there might be or how kids would answer questions. I find it a really good way to be able to specifically in math, you could use it during a math workshop time where you have kids look at a question, they start to think about what their thinking is. I always say that it's not necessarily the answer and the correct answer that is the end game for this. A lot of it may be that you're looking at what is your thinking for this? How would you solve this problem? It's the same thing for the ELA. It's how would you go through this? How do you open the page up? Can you see the whole passage? This is how you highlight. If we were to answer this question, what are some of the thinking that you would have to be able to answer this question? So it's great to just do them as a question of the day. You can give a modular assessment as an assignment to students in the portal, and you can work through the questions together. Sometimes, again, just having them work through it. Sometimes you can give them the answers and just say, how would we figure out this question? What is our thinking for this? Also, if you wanted to do as an assignment in the portal, it's done right in the portal, just like the interns were. You do not have to proctor assignments. So assignments, you don't need to start a session and let kids in or like you did for the interns for a lot of us. And students can either work independently or you can work as a group. And assignments can, again, be for pre-assessment, progress monitoring, or end of unit assessments or questions of the day. For, yes?
Questions, just I think as you go through.
Mm-hmm.
Gathering, they're both from the same person. So it says gathering data. I want to look at how the student responds to a question. I found that I can see all of my students, just a pod. Probably she meant I can't. Oh, that's what, and then she wrote, I can't see all of my students.
Okay, so is it, she can't see them after they?
Probably a roster problem.
I would say it's either, yeah, for sure it would be a roster problem if you're trying to administer it and you can't get all of your students to see your either assignment, or if you've set up a live session and your students aren't showing up, then that's definitely.
Oh, I think she means when she's looking at the data. So and the only way you can look at the data, unless you have school-wide access, is if you have a roster made up for you with all your students in it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're looking, so that's one thing you'd have to check. The other thing would be if it's ELA and they didn't submit it or they didn't do the writing piece, you won't be able to see their answers. You won't be able to see their results at all, actually.
Gotcha.
So
Yep.
if you want to,
Yeah.
write,
And if you need help figuring out, and your administrator, your sort of person that's your New Hampshire SAS administrator at your school is having trouble, you can definitely email myself, Heather Jenkins, or Ann Mordecai, and we can see if we can help you figure that out, and how to get rosters set up to make sure that you can see your students.
thank you.
All right. So if we're going to proctor them, you can, again, done in the portal, it can either be an active session or an upcoming session. You can create a session just like you did for the interims. And it means you need to be in the session, you need to start the session, and you need to admit students into the session. So it's a little bit different than an assignment. And we have a webinar coming up in March for how to administer these assessments. So if you're really confused about it, we have a whole webinar about how to do it. So here's how you're going to do it. You can go right into the portal, again, to test administration. So instead of going into the assessment viewing application, you're going to go into test administration. You're going to log in. And then this is what it looks like. So if you administered the interims in the fall, this looks very familiar to you. Right now, the system looks exactly like this. There is a possibility that the assignments, the at-home assignments might change once the New Hampshire SAS summative window opens, due to the testing requirements for the New Hampshire SAS summative. So it may look a little bit different starting probably the second week in March. But for right now, you're able to do everything that you were able to do for the interims. You've got the active sessions upcoming and at-home assignments. All right, so for modular assessment reports, so once your students finish a modular assessment, if you've gone in and you've created either an assignment or a session and your students have completed it, your results should be available. Again, if you're not rostered, you may not see. It would be interesting though why you can see some of your students but not all of your students. So it would probably have to do with your rosters or students not necessarily finishing a modular assessment. They're actually called benchmarks in there. They're as well. So if you're confused when you're looking at the reporting, when you choose a modular and you basically assign the assessment, as soon as it comes into the reporting, it's called a benchmark. So the report will have detail down to the question and standard level. So you'll be able to see that. And the data can be used for assessing understanding, creating groups for teaching, digging deeper into students' mastery of standards, and for you to be able to make sure that the way that you're teaching the standards is diving deep enough into that for the kids to be able to be successful. So to get into the reports, here's your 9-box page. You've chosen test administration again, and you go into reporting. And here is what a sample report would look like. This happens to be, I believe, an ELA report. So I've taken the students off. I can't show you real student data, and we don't have like a pretend database inside the portal. So we have here, you can see, this is really, as long as there are 10 questions, you will have these two columns that say the 5 items which students perform best on and the 5 items which students performed the worst on. So you can see which were the hardest questions for students and which ones were the easiest questions for students. You can also then look and see in general for all of the questions, how the students performed. If you click on the number, you can view what the question was. It shows you the corresponding domain, cluster, and standard. So you can also see what the correct answer is. And you can see if you click here on the number for the student, you can see how this student answered. So this number at the top will give you sort of the whole thing. And then this is down to what this particular student answered. Okay, so you can look at individual students and how they scored. And then you can take this type of report and you can export it to Excel. So if you are somebody who works in Excel and you really like Excel and you want to be able to kind of maneuver it and take a peek at it, this is what it looks like in Excel. It's just a little snippet of it. Again, I don't have the students on here. You would. It tells you which standard it is, how the students scored on it, and how many points they got. This is the maximum number of points that you can get. So this is 2. So this is how the students scored on this particular question. All right. So I wanted to point you in the direction of some other New Hampshire SAS resources that you might or might not be aware of. So if we're looking at this 9-box page here, and we look at test administration resources, you come up to this screen here. If you choose general information, there's a ton in here, but if you choose for teachers, these are some of the things that show up. There are performance level descriptors, or PLDs. So you can look at, for ELA, you can look at the grade 5 PLDs, and then for math, you can look at the grade 5 PLDs, and also for elementary school PLDs for science. Here's an example. So what this is this is an ELA for grade 5. And then what it says is for this particular standard, you will see what a student who's below proficient, approaching proficient, proficient, or highly proficient, and what they do to be able to get that particular, into that particular area. So it's really interesting to understand what students need to be highly proficient for each standard. In addition, in that same area, there are writing rubrics. You can see that there's rubrics for the modular assessments and for the summative assessments. We tend to, even though we're working with modulars here, we tend to show the summative rubrics because that's sort of our end game and where we want students to be able to be. So this is an example for grades 3 through 5. This is the opinion writing. So to score a 4 and a 3, and then it does go on, this is just a screenshot. You would be able to print out the whole rubric right from that general information area and from the portal. This has been something when we show this to sites, very rarely do people understand that there are rubrics in here. So these are super helpful in having students understand and having teachers understand how you score certain scores for writing. In addition, every grade level has a vocabulary list. This happens to be just a little snapshot of the 5th grade vocabulary list. There's also a screenshot of this in the 5th grade document that you'll gain access to tomorrow as well. But this is really helpful for you to know and for students to know what type of vocabulary they're going to see on the ELA assessments. And then the item type tutorials. So these are tutorials that help students understand the types of responses required and the tools that are going to be used within the New Hampshire SAS assessments. These aren't by grade level, but it's been really interesting. There's a little set of videos and just general information. So again, in test administration resources, instead of going into general information, you're going to go into students and families. And then you're going to go into practice tools. What this does is it just shows you all of the different types of tools that might be needed. Now, for 5th grade, you're not necessarily going to use the calculator for grade 6 basic, but there are a lot of different types of tools that are used that you might want to have kids practice with. So if you go to item type tutorials, here's all the different videos. Now they're not with sound, they're just little videos, and it just sort of shows students. Again, not every item type is used at every grade level, but if you know that you want to make sure that your students know how to use a table, then you could look at the table item and they can see how the text boxes work there in the table format or a grid or something like that. So those are also interesting. In addition, I have this sort of guide for you. A lot of us are very familiar with the Common Core, obviously, and looking at the Common Core and reading the standards. What we wanted to make sure that you understood is when you're looking at reporting within the portal, what the different terminology means and how they correlate. So this is a sample for math. This is here where you have operations and algebraic thinking. This is the domain that we're talking about. So as you're looking at reporting, these are the domains. And then underneath that, you have this write and interpret numerical expressions. This is the cluster. And then underneath the cluster are the specific standards. So as you look at the reporting, it will tell you the domain, it will tell you a cluster and which standards. So we just wanted to make sure that you understood how those correlated to what you're used to seeing for the Common Core standards. So this is math. Same thing for ELA. Up here for you have reading standards for literature. Here's your domain, key ideas and details. Here's your cluster. And then here are all of your standards for 5th grade underneath that. All right. So that is sort of the gist of our presentation. I have a few more slides to show, but I just wanted to pause for a second in case there's any questions.
Nobody has sent them in, but I bet somebody has one in their head, so you should ask.
Okay, so if there are questions, please put them in the Q&A. I'm going to go through the last few slides and give you a couple of minutes to be able to formulate your questions, and then we'll check in one last time. So we have a lot of webinars coming up this month and in the coming months. So if you go to our website, demonstratedsuccess.com, and you look at workshops and webinars, and you choose the data coaching, and you look at the New Hampshire DOE, this is everything that we have coming up through April 13th. There might be a couple of them added here and there, or they might change just a little bit, but we've got the modular assessment ones for grades 6 through 8 math, ELA, and science. And then we have the one that I was talking about earlier, the Administering New Hampshire SAS Modular and Summative Assessments coming up. And then for those people who are looking at the reporting and using Excel and all of that, we've got a beginner and an intermediate and advanced. And then just another Administering the New Hampshire SAS Interim and it actually probably should say Modular and Summative Assessments on April 13th as well. That's going to be the same webinar as the March 2nd one. If you want to look at past webinars, we have everything available also on our website, the data coaching webinars. You just click on the link. They bring you right to our Demonstrated Success YouTube channel. So even if you're in YouTube, if you don't go to our website, if you're in YouTube and you type in Demonstrated Success, it will show you all of our webinars and you can play them at any time. In addition, I am working on with Anne a New Hampshire SAS Modular PD program. If you're really interested in the modulars and would like some support or just some additional help within your school or your district, We are available. It is a free program. It's through the Department of Education. And we have been working with schools to figure out the best ways to be able to use these assessments and be able to get them really working with them and making sure that kids are understanding what they need to for standards, and in turn performing better on the summative assessments. So feel free, you can reach out again to myself or Anne, where we kind of head up that same program. And then again, you can look at us. Here we are on social media. We're on all of these platforms. We have some really interesting things coming up, just a little bit about us at Demonstrated Success and some things we like to do in winter. And then we have some really interesting articles that we're going to be posting that might be of interest to you, that are sort of really relevant and current. We also put in information about our webinars and just general great education stuff there. And then here,
You have a question that about how do we access the presentation in the future?
so this particular presentation you'll be sent an email tomorrow, and it will include the recording for this webinar and where it is on our YouTube channel. It will also include this PowerPoint, and it has a certificate for you for completion of this webinar if you need CEUs or hours. And it will also have two other documents. One is the grade 5 modular assessment sort of helpful guide. It's 22 pages of sort of screenshots and helpful information and just generally great information about the 5th grade modulars. And also it has access to that amazing spreadsheet that Annie Wallace put together that helps you sort of determine down to the question level for each modular and how you might be able to use them and what standards it's covering and what some of the misconceptions are. So it will all be sent in an email tomorrow.